As was just mentioned, we have legal limitations on who we can sell to, but the next group of presenters qualify as potential purchasers. We have various governmental entities, and we're going to start with Jefferson County Museum. Lori Wysong, Director of the Jefferson County Museum.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for making time for us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm Lori Wysong, Director of the Jefferson County Museum. And I'm here tonight to speak to you about an idea for the reuse of our county's historic courthouse once the county moves its court facilities to their new home. I'm sure I don't have to emphasize that this building is a priceless piece of history, and we're presented with what is probably an opportunity that will only happen once in our lifetimes. The chance to ensure that this building gets the future it deserves with a use that preserves and honors the history that it represents. I also can't say that the idea I'm going to present here is an original one. In fact, it's been brought up to me so many times by so many different people over the last several months that it honestly seems like a most natural and fitting purpose for the courthouse, and it's one that you may have already thought of yourselves. That idea is, of course, the courthouse as a future home for the Jefferson County Museum. Picture this. You enter the Jefferson County Courthouse. You're welcomed into a site where history was actually made. And before you is a timeline of Jefferson County's past, a selection of fascinating exhibits on different topics, not just in our local, but also in our national history, featuring one-of-a-kind artifacts and artworks that help tell these important stories. If you travel further into this space, you can access archival collections for research on history or genealogy. If you head upstairs, you can take a virtual tour of the bell and clock tower, as well as an in-person tour of the historic courtroom. There you'll learn about the West Virginia miners' trials of 1922, the Civil War battle that destroyed the previous courthouse in 1863, and the trial of John Brown and his men, which took place just a few years earlier there in 1859. If you go back even further into history, the original courthouse was built in 1803 on land donated by Charles Washington. When he died in 1799, Washington's will gave the lots on the town square, formed by George and Washington streets, to the formation of a new county seat, with the stipulation that they be used for public purposes. Barring its continuation as a county facility, any future usage of this building should keep it open to the public and interpret its rich history, as well as that of the county that it represents. The adjacent jail building, which survives today due to the foresight of preservationists, is a natural extension of the courthouse building and would be an asset to the museum in the event that we moved there. A little bit about our organization. The Jefferson County Museum is part of a nonprofit, Old Charlestown Library, Inc., with a history that extends all the way back to 1927 and encompasses both the Jefferson County Museum and the Charlestown Library. The museum is now in its 60th year and has a long institutional history, but also a vast collection of objects, archives, and photographs pertaining to Jefferson County's history. Many of the items that we have on display are of national importance and deserve exposure to a broader public. If you visited, you've probably seen a letter that was written by George Washington after his brother Charles died, the wagon that carried John Brown to his execution, and which before it came to the museum sat for many years outside of the courthouse, and the uniforms of Frank Buckles, who is the last surviving World War I veteran in the United States. This collection, housed in a National Historic Landmark with such rich history, would be an excellent way to showcase Jefferson County's most unique and important asset, which truly is its history. The building itself would become an important historic artifact and one well worth coming to view. So that brings me to my next point, which is that this is an idea that benefits not just the county and the museum, but the citizenry as a whole. Working at the museum's front desk, I am constantly asked by our visitors whether they can go and see the courthouse, whether they can tour the courthouse, whether there are any displays available in the courthouse, and the answer to these questions could and should be a resounding yes. Opening it to the public as a museum would make it more accessible than it ever has been. Moving the museum to the courthouse and jail buildings would give us the time and the perfect opportunity to evaluate our current exhibits, collections, and displays, and to get feedback from our local community about what they want to see more of from their local museum as we move to a location that truly represents the history of the entire county. In addition, the extra space would be much more conducive to expanding and diversifying our collection and also to hosting field trips from local schools and tour groups from outside the county. Right now, there are countless visitors to Jefferson County who come here for Harper's Ferry, which, with its history and beauty, is well worth seeing, but then they leave without venturing any further into the county. Having a destination as impressive and historic as the courthouse would be a visible, tangible reason to drive 10 minutes further into the county and learn more about our local and national history. People would be stopping along the way to eat, to shop, to get gas, and might even plan to stay an extra night in the county. It's an ideal place to educate them not only about Jefferson County's rich history, but about all the other places and activities that it has to offer in the present day, a front line for tourism and economic development. With all of the benefits that would be associated with the courthouse as a museum, it's no wonder that so many people have had the same idea about this space. So I think at this point, the question is not whether this should happen, but how. And I'm sure as I've been speaking, you've been wondering this. It would be a big step for all involved, and to do it right would be a complicated undertaking. To make this reality, we would need the support not only of our county commission, but of all of our local municipalities, as well as state entities such as the Department of Tourism and the State Historic Preservation Office. The preservation of this building is something that concerns us all, and the Jefferson County Museum hopes to create a coalition of interested stakeholders to offer long-term support in that endeavor. These would include, as I've mentioned, local and state governments, but also historical and cultural organizations and clubs to provide support and expertise for both the initial renovation project and the long-term preservation of the building. One practical way that we've come up with to support the building's maintenance is to rent parts of the space not used for the museum. The judges' chambers and the upstairs part of the courthouse would make ideal office spaces, and the connecting jail allows a separate, private entrance for tenants to use these spaces. The historic courtroom, when it is not open to the public, could be rented out for lectures, performances, private events, even weddings. There is precedent for these sorts of arrangements. The Entler Museum in Shepherdstown operates by renting out office and event spaces in its building. We've also spoken with the courthouse turned museum in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which rents out its historic courtroom under a similar arrangement with its county that it's located in. Closer to home, we have the example of the courthouse turned museum with the Civil War Museum in Winchester. This one operates under a slightly different model, but over the course of the years it's been open, it has done a terrific job in both renovating and fundraising for the space. Our county can draw from these and many other examples of museums that have moved into courthouses to create and sustain a state-of-the-art museum space that will give our incredible history its due. The courthouse's National Historic Landmark status, along with the specialized areas of history to which it connects, make it an excellent candidate for grants and funding opportunities. We're hopeful that there are many public and private sources of funding on both local and national levels, which would support our efforts to create and sustain a museum in this space. If given the opportunity to relocate the Jefferson County Museum to the courthouse and jail, our nonprofit, OCTL, would seek out architectural and design services to adapt the first floor of the buildings to its needs and to make it a welcoming museum space for the public, allowing for the development of a more concrete vision of any of the changes that would be needed and the funding required. We would then take steps to raise funds for the necessary renovations from public and private sources, using the time that is available to us to plan for the future and be ready to make these changes when the Jefferson County moves its court to its new home. But before we can do that, we would need a few things to happen. This includes further exploring both the courthouse and jail building, gathering information about square footage and utility costs, and gaining a clear understanding of the timeline for the renovation and move of the county offices and courtroom to their new facilities. I'd like to formally invite our county commissioners at this time to come and to visit the museum, to take a look at our current exhibits, and to meet with our board members who have unanimously approved the exploration of this exciting possibility. Finally, we will have to discuss what type of arrangement for the ownership and maintenance of the property is most suitable for Jefferson County and other interested stakeholders. We look forward to talking with many of you about your ideas and concerns and brainstorming the future of the courthouse's museum. Once we receive some assurance that Jefferson County is indeed interested in pursuing this possibility, we can begin this process of making the idea, which so many of us have shared, a reality, and transforming the courthouse into the future home of the Jefferson County Museum. Thank you for your time and consideration of how to best handle the rare opportunity we're faced with tonight.
Thank you so much. Excellent presentation. That was very thorough. You've already answered pretty much all of my questions, but just for the record, you're interested and willing to partner with the state and National Park Service?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, I think partnerships are really how you make this type of thing happen. Mm-hmm. So the more people involved and support that we're able to get for it would be helpful.
You mentioned fundraising. We have already started seeking funds from the federal government, state government, et cetera. We voted as the commission to make it as a priority in our interactions with the federal government, and that's County Administrator Benitez can show you records of that if you don't have it. I'd be happy to meet with your board. Thank you for the invitation. Can you tell us about your experience with fundraising?
Sure. So, I think that this would be a different level than the experience that I or any of the other staff at our nonprofit possess. We would have to probably have a capital campaign to raise money for this courthouse. In addition to that, I think that the letter that I sent to the commission, which should be in your packets this week, outlines some more specific, grants, earmarks, other things we would pursue. Our nonprofit might end up having to hire a professional fundraiser for this because, quite frankly, this would require the support of individual donors, and I think would be attractive to individual donors just based on the John Brown history, the labor history associated with the site. It's a very attractive project, but I think it's just a matter of finding the right people who would be interested in addition to the public grants that are out there.
Thank you. Other questions from commissioners?
It's a great presentation. I'm excited to see it head that direction.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would be very interested to have more conversations sooner than later if you have to raise money. I think tell us the time frame on exiting the courthouse, Eddie, just so we have since everybody's here.
That one we haven't set yet. So first is getting into this building, and that's by the end of 2026. And then we have to work on our own capital stack to build out the other building. So that is really dependent on that.
I will add with the fundraising, I mentioned drafting a plan for design, architectural changes, whatever is necessary to turn the space into a museum. I think that our nonprofit would be able to, cover that initial plan, but we would have to have an initial plan in order to know what to fundraise for. As some of our other speakers have mentioned, it's nice to be able to show something to people who are investing in your project for what the space can be so that they have a vision of that. And also to have a concrete, number of how much money you need. As I'm sure you're aware with your move to this building, it's hard to determine that without knowing what's needed for the space. So the cost wouldn't be insignificant, but I think we would be able to raise the funds for it.
Okay.
Awesome. Others? Thank you so much. We'll keep talking.
You're welcome. Yeah, we'll be in touch, I guess.
All right.